Hi guys! So I'm not gonna show myself in this video because while recording I was feeling a bit under the weather, but getting back to the model itself. So I found him in my pile of shame. At first he didn't seem like anything unusual. A nice looking ultramarine miniature. Probably a sergeant, lieutenant or a captain, with a really quirky looking sword. A strong Roman aesthetic. As I found out a bit later, he is a very special character in the model history. So let's dive into his lore and paint him then. I'm not gonna show you the whole process of me looking for any miniatures or sculpts, but this is more or less how I would retrace how I've been looking for the Space Marine Captain. So first of all, I've put in the phrase Metal Space Marine Captain and went into the photos. You can probably see many models there, but fortunately enough I was lucky to find the correct one. And looking at it, I saw that it's an Ultramarine Chapter Master Captain Metal. Alright, so let's try Ultramarines Captain, and the phrase metal here is very important because it can distinguish from many miniatures. So at this point I was more or less sure that I'm looking for the correct miniature. You could also find some very good miniatures like this one, probably also Captain, I hope not. But the model itself was the correct one, so I was now looking for this one, and I went to something different now. So the next step most of the time for me is just going into the Lexicanum.com. It's a very nice web page where you can find, I think, most or if not even all of the miniatures, Warhammer miniatures. And then when I have something specific that I'm looking for, I'm just scrolling through the category, and this time it was Space Marine miniatures. So I knew that this was a pretty old miniature, so I had to go down and then stop at 99 and then slow down a little bit and start looking. As you can see, we have many very nice miniatures here, and if you scroll a little bit down, then you have it, 1991 Ultramarines Captain. So this is the miniature, and you can see that it was White Dwarf 133 when it was presented in the year, which year was it? 1991. Alright, so I was hot on the trail of this Ultramarine Captain, but still I wanted to know who sculpted him. When it comes to finding out some more details about the miniatures, about the sculpts themselves, then I go to the Stuff of Legends, the Citadel Miniatures catalog, and I knew that it was the year 1991, so it was the best thing for me to look in the 2000 Citadel Miniatures annual. And more or less what I do is just scroll through the pages and look for the specific miniature that I'm looking for at the moment. So as you can see, we have many Space Marine models here, some chaplains, so standard banners, librarians. We have also Mariners Calgar and the Dark Angels, and just going a little bit further, and we have the Space Marine Captains. So here he is, the Space Marine Captain. We also have his number here. We also have the backpack sprue that should be included into this Marine, so I've chosen the correct one when it comes to the model. And as you can see here, he was designed by Jes Goodwin. If you don't know who Jes Goodwin is, then I suggest googling it. Jes Goodwin, for all of you that don't know, is in my, and not only my opinion, one of the forefathers and creators of modern Warhammer miniatures. If you look at the sculptors of the first Warhammer models, his name will come up relatively often, as he is responsible for hundreds of concepts and miniatures. Currently he is the lead miniature designer at Games Workshop. Alright, so we got some lore, so it's time to move into the miniature itself. I will not show the cleaning process as it is extremely boring. Fortunately for me, I had the specific backpack that went with the model and an extra fitting Ultramarine banner. The model itself after the cleaning had some metal mold lines and they had to be dealt with. Just take a hobby knife, cut them away and then sand all of the imperfections as you would with a plastic or resin model. The metal is very soft and submits to grinding like newer models do. The next step was fitting him into a 24mm base and gluing them together. Afterwards, it was just removing the backpack from the sprue, sanding the mold lines after cutting it out and gluing it to the miniature. I wanted a really simple base, something that would resemble the old Games Workshop models. Therefore, he had to get one skull on the base and some technical astrogranite. It was enough for the time being. The focus of the miniature had to go fully to the wonderful model. Nothing could or should distract the viewer on the base. The model was prepared for priming, so I stuck him as I always do with a double-sided tape to a wine cork. If the tape is good enough, it will hold even a bigger metal miniature. It is just important for it to stick to the bottom side of the base in as many places as possible. Wine corks unfortunately don't give that luxury. It is good enough for priming, but after this step the model always goes to a dedicated handle. Something that really stuck to me is using a chromatic black on the miniature. I know that it is natural for modelers to leave all of the shadows black, but if you notice, nothing is black or white. All of the colors visible in nature are just dark versions of different shades. To get chromatic black, you need to mix the right proportion of two opposite colors from the color wheel. For me, this still is something I need to practice, but I am getting better and better with every try. The next thing was the darkest tone of the blue shade, and in this specific case a very dark Prussian blue ink. From the airbrush, of course, that covered almost all of the miniature. I was not worried about the overlapping layers. They were all very thin and sprayed evenly from the airbrush. Next, I diluted Macragge blue and sprayed it on the model, leaving just the darkest shadows with the chromatic black and Prussian blue. Afterwards, the miniature was ready for brushwork and adding highlights. Now listen carefully, my miniature loving friends. This is a tale of caution to all of you. After seeing JuanHidalgo's video about glazing, I thought I would give his method a try. The approach states that you don't need to water your paints. You just need to have a delicately wet brush and spread the paint on the wet palette until the consistency is good enough for the type of glaze you need. Then it is just important to not overload your brush with the glaze, and you never should get a bad result. If not, you get a semi-thick glaze, then no problem. It is still a thin layer that you can paint over with. The thing that didn't change was the fact that the characteristics of the glazes stay the same. You need a shitload of them to get the result you want. It took me 2 night sessions and more than 400 glazes to get the blue done. Believe me. If you don't have time, just make a few shades of the initial paint and the highlight, and layer it. This will save you a lot of time. The link to the mentioned video will be in the description. After this glazing marathon, I went with the last paint as a semi-glaze and in some points even a layer. The same blue paint was used to do the edge highlights. The model was starting to look better with every brush stroke. Remember that at this point it will look bad. At the very end you will start to notice that it is starting to resemble something that you initially wanted. For now it is just a blue blob of paint on a piece of metal. The next thing on the menu was doing the second biggest set of elements. In this case it was the gold NMM. I could of course go with the classic look and use a true metallic metal, but I was so far past my schedule that it didn't make any difference, and as it will be a model for my own collection, I wanted it to look as good as possible. NMM gold then. My usual order is getting the darkest brown as a base paint and getting brighter with each layer until I go to ivory or just pure white. The method is tested and very reliant. It is just me having a bad day that doesn't make it work, and this must have been a very specific day for me. After the NMM was done, I was for no peculiar reason now, when I think about it, dissatisfied with the end result. It just kind of seemed very off to me. Something didn't match up. Maybe I should have left him as he was. Maybe after doing the rest it would click and the NMM would merge nicely with the rest. Don't know. I thought that maybe it was time for the same technique but a different approach, a slightly different approach. Therefore I painted all of the soon to be gold parts black and took pictures under a lamp to see the highlight places, and I just went on with the painting of the gold NMM. It is always good to start over when something doesn't seem correct. The miniature can take a lot of paint before the details will be damaged visually with too many layers. At this stage I was giving the model thin coats and I could afford to paint it over with black and start anew. This time I did the NMM in a different order. I started with the mid-tone and then went on to the highlights according to the pictures I took. The photos were very helpful and gave me a better understanding of the highlight places according to a zenithal lamp light, which, not perfect, but mirrors the sun at its zenith. After all of the highlights were done, I started putting the light brown for the shadows and the darkest browns for a very small darkest shadows in some places. This also gave me a bit more flexibility with correcting any mistakes. I know that it should not make any difference to the previous method, but for some reason it did, and I will use this for my gold NMM in any of my future projects. For the steel NMM I went with my usual mixture, but this time it was also glazing. At this point, after finishing all of the NMMs and the armor, I think I counted more than 800 glazes, and it was still rough. Not as smooth as it could be, of course. This is not a contest level model, but I would consider him as one of my best. The only thing left was doing the smaller details, and believe me, there are many of them. Lots of greens, reds, greys, browns, and even doing some fluo paint for the plasma. What is really funny, the biggest challenge was gluing the banner, which came out really bad. But as I only had that one, I didn't want to tear and ruin it. Well, are you ready to see the model? And this is the final result. I am extremely happy that I have painted this ancient captain model, one of the first metal captains and the first ultramarine captain. The cherry on the top is that he was done by my favorite sculptor, Jes Goodwin. I am happy at how he came out, and I will keep him on my shelf proudly next to other timeless classics I intend on painting in the future. So what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments, please. And don't forget to share, like and subscribe, and see you in the next video.